Ja, jetzt auch nochmal Hallo von mir. Ich bin Isabella aus dem Social Media Team der Tag.
Hi, I'm Isabella from the Tagesschau social media team. You're far away, I can hardly see you, but I have to say I'm so happy to see you again.
Natürlich nur positive Gründe, aber
And of course, that has only positive reason, but it also has a constructive reason, because I need your help.
ich hänge da fest und ja,
I'm stuck.
Pandemiejahre haben das nicht.
And the last 2 years of the pandemic haven't made it much easier. I'm in a toxic relationship.
Ich meine nicht die hier.
And I don't mean this one,
Jede kleinste
but a different one. Every small thing ends in conflict and aggression, and cutting contact is the only way out. But we just can't do without each other's.
voneinander los.
Our communities, we can't do without each other, but we can't do with each other also. You're probably from editorial offices, and you probably all do community managers. So you know Russian trolls currently, but also before, the fake news discussion during the pandemic, and all of the conspiracy myths. I could go on and on about everything that's going on in our communities, but all this hate, what do we do with it? We can power wash it away, we can block it, we can delete it.
Darüber wollen wir heute reden.
And constructive content is hard to find.
Es muss sich was ändern.
And I think that something needs to change about community management, and this is what I want to talk about today.
Was können wir tun, damit
What can we do to have a good discussion culture, also in big formats like Tagesschau, the daily news in Germany? And I can't answer those questions on my own. This is why I got help.
Ladies hier auch
The three ladies have been introduced to you. I find it really, really nice that we have an all-female panel here. I was really looking forward to this.
hat Professor Dr.
We have a Tagesschau editor. We've got Hannah Klinghoff and Laura Roschewitz, who is a business psychologist, and they're very efficient at handling the hate. So let's jump right in.
zu schnell. Ist ja eh nur eine Untermalung, ne?
Was a bit fast, but it's just the background, right? So you're a community manager at Tagesschau.
Ist das nicht eigentlich nur Hassschau für
Isn't it just hate show? Is it hate community management or hate management? Hi, thank you for your question. Very good question.
ganz viele Communities? Manche
We have just one community, we've got many communities.
einen Diskurs, einen konstruktiven
And it's actually about constructive exchanging opinions. It's about having freedom of speech on the web and
Meinungshoheit darum zu sagen, das ist
leading the discourse and finding it's not about saying this is the right opinion and that is the wrong opinion. Platforms are very different here. Instagram is quite open and diverse in discourse, much more so than Facebook,
Meinungskrieg, nenne ich es mal
where we have a war of opinions that we see every day.
Und bei Instagram
In that case, I would see myself as a firefighter, but on Instagram, there's much more constructive criticism and discourse. Our youngest platform is TikTok, and it's the strongest growing.
da
It's our second biggest platform, and users are so young that they're still discussing and that they still have questions they want answers to.
in der gleichen Redaktion ab.
So I know what it's like because we work in the same editorial office. So explain to us, how does it work when a posting goes online?
Die das Posting erstellen.
Well, when it goes online, the editors look at the posting for half an hour. What are the reactions like? Are there any questions
Danach gehen unsere SupporterInnen
content-wise? And after that, our content producers come in and deal with the shit, basically.
mit
and use tools to sift through the comments and sort through the reactions, but also talk about legally relevant comments, for example, that contain hate speech or incitements to violence, and also comments that are against good taste, and take them off the platform. I want to stress that how would you say how many comments are there? It's 30,000 comments a day, just to give the numbers. So it's one comment every 3 seconds. So we have a comment now, a next posting, comment now, a comment on the posting from 3 weeks ago, a comment on Ukraine crisis, which is outdated, then a comment on TikTok video, a comment on the Twitter. So I'm bad at counting, but it just goes on and on. And it can't always go on like that, you know it. So we use tools to tackle the incoming flood of comments, and they may have other effects than just pre-sorting our comments. And this is what Hannah Klimpe deals with. And I would like to hear from you, and I've read from you, you criticize those tools because they can have paradox effects, right? Yes, 3 years ago, I started to do research on community management because it's a fascinating topic, and it has a large discrepancy in communication science that do analysis on what percentage of discourse is hate speech is always a very low percentage between 1 and 1.5%. And then on the other hand, you have so many studies of how users perceive hate speech on the internet. For example, there's a hate on the web study that says that a large percentage of users has been subjected to hate comments and doesn't want to continue posting because of that. So professional users impact positive discourse quality, and community managers of media houses and political institutions and NGOs, there's a subjective perception that there's more and more hate comments, more and more disinformation, and that is not reflected in the numbers, actually. Community managers said there's the moderation paradox. The more I moderate, the more I create future needs for moderation. And using tools that automatically filter content result in community managers only dealing with the 1 to 1.5%. And this is what trolls want, basically, or people who launch campaigns. And because there is that possibility to use software to fight that, the room for constructive discussion is smaller in perception, and we would need another way of thinking in the editorial offices. Also, a different use of software and a different way of moderating content. Absolutely. We will come back on that later, on how to deal with the tools and how we should change the tools. What I was just wondering, Laura, what does hate do to us when we moderate it all day? I have the highest respect for Frida and her team, because me, as an editor, if I spend a longer amount of time on comments, I kind of get a comment hangover. What does that hate do to us? And how does it create a bias in ourselves? Thank you. So a very fundamental topic that I see is that we, as people who deal with online comments several hours a day, sometimes lose perspective on those percentages emotionally. Of course, our head understands it's this and that percentage, but emotionally, as social beings, if we spend 40, 50 times an hour on hate speech, that's a significant part of our time we spend awake, and of course, it weighs on our emotions and on our mental health. I think 30 to 50% of our time awake is consumed by that, and that's a huge problem. Of course, a poison is defined by the dose, and if it's a high dose and you don't have coping strategy, you end up with feelings like hopelessness and powerlessness, maybe even rage against society because you have a distorted perception of society. Now, there's different approaches. There's this psychosocial approach on constructive community management, but sometimes I'm wondering, like, many people just dump hate on the web, organized or not organized, for diverse reasons. Is it even possible to reach those people? That's a big question. I think you can reach any person. The question is in which rooms, on which channels, and with which type of communication. Pressure always results in counter-pressure. So if we react on the same level, for example, on a crass comment, to react with a comment, normally this person just wants to be seen, to be heard, to put themselves forward with their opinion. And to discuss in the comments is usually not sustainable. You have to have rooms where people come in contact. People don't often visit their neighbors, knock on their door and say, what's up with you? That doesn't happen very often. It all happens digitally, so we need real rooms where people can communicate, people from different backgrounds and different from people from different realities. So we want to have conflict, we want to have communication, but we need other platforms, because on the platforms you have people enclose themselves, and this creates an artificial wall. So realistic content management with the number of comments, Frida. I think it depends on your own ambitions. Some people are just lost. People dump hate on the web. I totally agree with Laura here. And they're not interested in discourse. It's not about discussing. It's about dominating the opinion and dump their opinion that they think is the only truth and having it stand there. It's possible to discuss constructively with users who have real questions or valid criticism, and it needn't always be criticism. It can also be constructive, positive criticism. We see it on Instagram all the time, that you can really get into discussions. But it gets difficult on Facebook if there's X number of accounts where we know realistically this is not a single person that distribute fake news and conspiracy myths. That's just a scrapyard digitally. So I'm always wondering, and we've spoken about the bias created by those tools. I remember a study where the whole here thing was discussed. A percentage of that showed a percentage of accounts that do hate speech, and that was such a low percentage. And also that conflicts with the perception when you spend all day before in front of the tools. I know that Hannah, with her research team, looked at that and the question of members of parliament who are invited by Abgeordnetenwatch. There's a huge amount of comments, 200,000 comments and questions to members of parliament in the past 10 years. And I would be interested, do you see a change? Has the hate become worse? Well, that's the interesting thing. Taking aside 2020 with the coronavirus pandemic, the 200,000 questions, those were not questions posted on social media, but on a platform specifically designed by Abgeordnetenwatch. And in the interviews, yeah, people did have the feeling that the comments got worse, but distributed over 10 years, we did a sentiment analysis. The tonality hasn't changed. It was always slightly negative, which is kind of down to the nature of the platform, because, of course, it's meant to pose critical questions to politicians. And other than März in 2020, there weren't any statistical outliers. The most critical topics were health and foreign politics, of course, because of coronavirus. But no, Cambridge Analytica and the rise of the AfD, it wasn't reflected in the questions. And we looked at all the questions, those published and those not published, because of the codex. That was about a third that was rejected. And of course, they were more negative than the ones that were published, obviously. But basically, we confirmed what you hear again and again when you look at quantitative research. There's a lot of constructive criticism and there's a lot of confirming comments, like people just confirm what happens or attack others, but it's a very loud minority that is given a lot of attention. Of course, that plays into the moderation paradox, because the more attention you give the issue, of course, people know if I go on the web and do hate speech, I'll get reactions. So the question is, how can we get out of this defensive space and do good active community management? Of course, you have to treat all the comments because, of course, some are legally relevant, but how much room do we have to give to hate speech, and how much room do we want to give to constructive criticism?
I see Frida is getting ready to say something more about how it is with us and how we can manage that. But one thing that I wanted to ask you is just, can you explain to us how we measure constructivity? So you start by categorizing terms as positive in a lexicon, and then you perform a sentiment analysis based on these lexicons. So it's automated, but without AI. And there's always the requirement to have these specific for each language. Most of the things that are developed are for the English language area and not applicable in German. And then you have these machine learning analyses where an algorithm gets trained, and both of these methods have their advantages and disadvantages. For example, an algorithm can be trained too tightly, but at the same time, lexicons are quite susceptible to language changing, so some phenomena are not reflected anymore. But it's quite interesting. There's one English language automated approach, the constructive commons corpus, that you cannot use for German language analyses, but there's very little that's actually focusing on these analyses. There's a project that's named more often recently as Perspective API, co-developed by Google, that's also based on a premise that we will make discussions better by better identifying negative commentary. And that is something that the practical work from community management just doesn't bear out, that removing negative comments makes more room for positive comments. So from that perspective, that's not going to be the only solution. Instead, we will need a proactive strategy for constructive community management that goes beyond just deleting negative commentary. If I may interject here, this is my cue. I think it's incredibly important, this point when we think about our brains processing a no less easily than a positive affirmation. Like, I don't want to smoke anymore. I don't want to look at my cell phone first thing in the morning. It's tough for our brains because it's not sure what it should do. So for many social and psychological topics, it's always there's always a focus on providing an alternative. So instead of saying, please, no hate, no negative comments, the perspective is missing. What do you want instead? So that's what I mean when I say spaces. We need spaces where positivity happens, but also where for these people that you mentioned earlier, where there's a certain response, where I don't know them personally, but I know the studies, I know psychological phenomena. Many people find it important to get some sort of reaction, to provoke something, to get into contact. And this may sound weird at first because people do this with a hateful comment, but hate is often a symbol of dominance. Submission, and still I get a reaction, and if I only get no, then often that reinforces that instead, which you may know, for example, from raising children. So just a no is not usually a good way to get to something positive and constructive. And that's why I want to create these spaces where we also have room for friction, for real conflict, and for communication that goes beyond, no, don't do it this way. Yeah, I know this from my own childhood. No makes it interesting. That's something that I also see in my own daughter now. So, Frida, I guess this is like a gut feeling because we didn't analyze this yet. But from your perspective, is it really the case that things didn't become any less constructive, even at Tagesschau? Well, less related to what? You need something to compare it to. Maybe pre-COVID or pre the refugee crisis. The word I didn't want to mention, but before 2015, maybe. What do we have? 2015, wasn't there an economic crisis? There's probably a crisis then as well. Then before that, I guess 2010. Then there was terror, there was 9/11. I think if you keep going backwards, there was Rwanda, then the war in Bosnia, or maybe the other way around. You see the point I'm trying to make here. There's always something going on. May sound cynical, but I work in a news editor, and the problem is people will always find something that they can frame negatively and then criticize that in an inappropriate manner. And so I would like to agree with what Hannah said earlier. The tools that are used in community management are often focused on filtering negativity, to filter out the worst of the worst, make it stand out so a community manager can then make a decision and figure out if we should delete this comment from the platform or not. But that often leads people to forget there's also a lot of positive commentary that are helpful, constructive, or at least neutral, not negative. People just want to contribute their opinion, maybe even bots sometimes, if we want to split it into two different categories. We get 30,000 comments per day, and approximately a third of those, depending on the news cycle, is classified as somebody should look at that. That doesn't mean that this comment that is filtered should be removed or is criminally relevant. It just means that this tool, based on various criteria, said somebody, a human, should look at this. And with the community managers, that quickly leads to this perception that everything is just bad, bad, bad. It's negative, because that's the way we put our focus. So then the issue becomes, how can I filter out positive comments? How can I identify positive wording, neutrality? Do I even want that? So that I have to look at all the 30,000 comments per day, because then I don't have any advantage from the tools anymore. And of course, you have to consider who's going to read all of that, who's going to spend all the time. Yeah, initially you said you are a news editor and sarcastic. And I wanted to ask you, what is your superpower to deal with all the hate that you deal with all day, that you need to power wash or shovel the shit away? I think my personal superpower is a mixture of sarcasm and, I guess, an optimism that results from that. It's a bit hard to explain. But you should always keep reminding yourself that it doesn't reflect the majority of our society. Just because you have a posting about migration in Germany and you get a ton of racist and just disgusting comments, it doesn't mean that the majority of people in Germany think that way. A majority of people, if you look at Facebook's usage numbers, are just simply silent about this, if we use Facebook as a proxy for society at large. So as a community manager, you definitely need thick skin. You cannot take things too seriously and don't take everything at face value. And also you need a certain sense of gallows humor. Do we need only thick skin, or do we also need some support, I wonder? Well, if you ask me, there can only be one answer to that. What I believe is problematic and what I see in my work is that the way we do it in many areas, and community management is not an exception here, is that we apply outdated concepts of work to new types of content. So maybe where in some jobs it makes sense to work 40 hours and then take 2 days off and repeat that and do just one job within these 40 hours. I think in, for example, looking at community management, looking the way it does, we have to discuss whether that's appropriate and whether that's the right thing. Because 40 hours are quite a big part of my week. And then when I'm also maybe working in a home office, haven't seen my colleagues face to face ever. And especially in the past 2 years, I've had very few sources of energy because a lot of things went away. Many things became more complicated, complex. Then I think it's just not going to be sustainable from a mental health perspective to sit at home and look at hate all day, because just the spatial distance is missing, and that does something to us. There's a difference whether we look at these things at home, where I'm trying to then later separate myself and have a good life. Our brain is very much working with anchors, so whenever I see a chair that looks like this, I'll think back to this day. So when I sit at home for 40 hours a week on my kitchen table and read these negative comments, and then after that I want to just sit down and eat cheese toast and feel good, then that's just really, really hard for my brain. So to sum it up, yes, we need support, but also we need spaces, my favorite word today, where the people that work in community management can talk to each other, process what happened, and also maybe do something else for work, and something that's not 100% about negativity. Yeah, I also have one follow-up question about support. So we said we're not going to name names of tools that we're talking about here, but they advertised that they would also identify positive sentiment, constructive debates, and we talked about it ahead of time. And yeah, of course, I could set this up, but people don't do it. So some people might say, you know, I'm busy enough shoveling this shit. I don't want to deal with the setup and everything as well. But the question for me is, why doesn't this happen in practice? I didn't encounter anyone that I interviewed who said, yes, we also have filters that we systematically set up that highlight constructive comments. Why not? Yeah, I would like to reply to that directly. Working not just on the power washing and the putting out fires, but there's also a lot of projects we do with AI. in the space of sentiment and semantic analysis. And most of the things available on the market, there's not just 1 or 2 or 5 solutions. Most of them already fail the language part, because it's really hard to teach an artificial intelligence the way we speak. For example, the word mies sucks, and for most people this has a negative connotation. And then sometime in 2010 or so, that became something positive, where people would say, "Oh wow, this really sucks," but in a positive way. And now try to explain to an artificial intelligence how this kind of language change happens. That's one of the big problems. And how can artificial intelligence distinguish whether I mean, wow, that sucks in a positive way and I celebrate this, or whether I actually criticize something in a way that cannot be positively connotated. So this is already the fundamental issue, that an AI has to learn language like a child and try to make these connections, try to understand irony, which is always hard on the internet, but then even harder for artificial intelligence, because if I'm struggling as a human that understands language in entirety, then an AI will never be able to figure that out, because there's a lot of room for interpretation. So trying to map that to a computer program, that's a gigantic challenge that at least a lot of companies are now working on. They've seen that there is a challenge here, and they're trying to extract the positive more and more. And yes, they're already advertising that they can do it, but that's not what your experience actually like. No, I guess that's just the window shopping effect, the traditional one. The artificial intelligences that I know, the tools I use, and I don't want to say that it doesn't exist in the market, but the ones that I've seen are just basically word filters, and they don't really understand the language. They don't speak the language. So we know we can learn dictionaries by heart, but it doesn't matter if we don't understand the grammar.
Well, the question that raises itself is, don't we do enough pressure? Because that's what I wonder. There's a lot of demand, right? But it looks like there's not enough pressure behind it, and that's what I'm afraid of. And it fits the topic and the title of this panel, which I also want to discuss about with you. The question is, can we just ghost the hate, for especially those comments that are legally relevant, that we file complaints about and that we hope are prosecuted? And we've recently been shown that it doesn't work that well, what we already suspected. So what do we do? Can we ghost it? Because ghosting isn't inherently something positive. Is it the right tool? From my perspective, no. Ghosting would be wrong, because we should take those comments seriously. Taking hate seriously, I can't support tolerating hate or leaving it be. There are attitudes that we have to confront with as much as we can. So it's maybe not ghosting, but hosting. Get away from the negative view. Why do so many people only write negative comments? This is not only a question in community management for political questions, it's the same for restaurant and hotel reviews. 80% only come to complain, even if there's many, many more people who were happy and had a good experience. So how do we create a culture where we get away from this negative view and get more positive, reward positive action, create resonance, and foster fun? That's not very German, giving positive reviews, right? Well, there's a new white paper from the State Media Agency of North Rhine-Westphalia, together with the Düsseldorf University, about community management and how community managers should act concretely. And the whole resource and tool and strategy debate comes up. But it concludes exactly what Laura says. You shouldn't ghost them, but you shouldn't give them an exclusive platform. You need to foster the positive, and the whole job would look very differently. Of course, you have to put out fires, but you can also have intelligent conversations. And this would be a desirable job again, wouldn't it? Should we ghost the hate? So it's a clear yes'nt. If there's a racist comment, for example, I'm not arguing skin colors. So I ghost those comments in that sense. And if it's bad enough, it's taken off the platform. And this takes us back to the interpretation room. Is it just my opinion that this is hate speech, or can you read it differently? It's also about the platforms themselves. If I read about fake news and conspiracy myths and can comment, no, this is wrong because, this means that the parent comment is pushed up by the algorithm because we, the account owner, are answering, and the algorithm likes that. And the first child comment, even if there's 50 other comments, is also displayed. And I give the comment more reach that way, and that's a bad thing. There's a lot of people who contact the public broadcasting services via DMs, and we also get a lot of distasteful, putting it mildly, comments. And the fact that there is no algorithm that it's one-to-one communication means that we get into debates. So that doesn't mean I start discussing topics like religion, gender, or skin color, but it often helps to tell people it's not funny. And if you're a 13-year-old and you feel cool because you discriminate against someone, and then you just answer, not funny, or do you think this is okay? Often you get reactions like, okay, that wasn't cool, I'm sorry. So there's options. There's wriggle room. And it isn't always as bad as it looks on first sight. So it all has potential. Yeah, this is also something we monitored on Abgeordnetenwatch. That's also one-to-one communication, and presenters often say when they just answer the question back, like, do you want to us to publish us like that? Then people say, oh, sorry, no, I was emotional when I wrote that. I'll think about it again. So this is not the nature of social media platforms. They are focused on creating content. They want people to spend time there. So taking out the pressure and the speed would make it so much more relaxed. But I'm pessimistic about that because that's structurally not in the interest of social media platforms. Okay, we want to open up this discussion to the audience. So I would like you to give a short statement about what do you wish for utopian community management of the future. What do you need in your editorial offices? What tools do you need? What do you want to deal with hate differently? I can start. We need rooms. So the status quo now is that we need exchange rooms, processing rooms, and a different balance between the negative and the positive view. The positive being creative, getting into contact with positive comments. And for those people who want resonance, we need a possibility to find a room between this attraction of reacting quickly to a post and the reward, to give that room. So we need new structures that make this possible, so that people don't just spew out their first reaction, but learn to do real debates, question things, and realizing when you've gone too far. This also works virtually, but it takes time and experience and people who know what they're doing. I would say you would need two things, utopian things. A lot more research on development of technological solutions. You could also work with networks. It's not a miracle solution, but on the other hand, we also have to see it as a task of the society and journalism to just define a better culture. Don't ask, do it and work on it. Take it as a goal and work on strategies. Things like spaces, chat rooms, community management spaces, combining different methods other than technical tools to create a balance. Yeah, I would continue on that. I wouldn't say it's impossible. It was about what is on the market, and what the market provides is just what we have. It would be utopian to have a huge budget and create a tool that's exactly to our requirements. So we need we basically need the resources. So I'll open up a new debate. That's always good when we're at the end of a session. I would wish for platforms to ensure that every account has to have a person behind them. So for it not to be possible to have 12 accounts and post the same bullshit 12 times and make blow up the hate artificially. That would make it more difficult for those people, because they would see that there are only 5 among 5 million. All right, let's get to utopia. I think there's a room microphone. So it's a bit weird with the headphone situation, but I can hear you. Is there a home microphone? Yes, there is one. Hi, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Sasha is my name. So I've been thinking about this all the time. You've said it several times. You have to put it into relation. How many people saw a posting and how many comments do you have? Because I always only see likes and comments. Wouldn't it be a fast solution to see the views and not just the comments and likes? So see how many people have seen it. What do you think? I can imagine that it would make a difference. If you put the numbers into relation, could support our brains in processing all this. For videos, you can often see it, and even there, I don't see a lot of progress. You can see it like on YouTube, for example. That's a platform they haven't elaborated on a lot. In the comments, I'm a bit skeptical if it really has a profound effect, because YouTube also has a very rough tone, to put it mildly. And there we have the view numbers, so I'm not sure. I also am afraid that this will just be another KPI that you can work with. in order to create visibility. The problem is that you are dealing with abstract numbers, and one or the other hate commenter would certainly profit from knowing how many likes do you have on Facebook. 2.3 million likes. So to see that it's not 2.3 million people who see his bullshit, but only 671 people, but that's still a lot of people, might be more than in their home village. And they might think, okay, next time I hit 1,500. So as soon as you have numbers, this again becomes an attractive value for trolls. Okay, I can't really see you, but thank you very much to all the helpers who are reaching around the mics. All of this wouldn't be possible without you. Hi, I have a question. You were talking about spaces that you need for managing hate. How would you imagine those, like digitally and in real life? Okay, I'll take that question. Analog or digital, I think we need both. It's not enough to say it's a miracle solution that we all sit together and talk about things, because that doesn't reach a lot of people. So some of those spaces have to be virtual. And in my opinion, that's possible. I work a lot with teams and groups and in open formats in my workshop. And it shows me every time that this sparks a connection, and people realize, okay, we may have different opinion, but there's so much that connects us. And this is the goal of those spaces. So to answer your question, what can it look like in the analog and the digital space? I think we need new ideas. So whether we really say there's an open time slot for speaking live that's not recorded, that's not commented anonymously, but really happening live, like we're sitting here today, because often the problematic is the same happens again and again if we offer a communication format. So you really have to approach people live and see their opinion. And often the opinions get a lot more mild then, because when you ask people what exactly makes you angry, it dampens the heightened spirits, and the mood gets different. Okay, and myself, I'm always skeptical. We all use social media and platforms. We all know it's a blessing and a curse. And we never know what crazy billionaire will buy our platform next. And on the other hand, it's a bit back to the roots. Only using homepages and forums, this is not the solution. That wouldn't work either. Frida? Discussion rooms and forums have always worked really well. Let me just remind you of Fortune or Reddit, where you have subreddits discussing how to rape women but without being prosecuted in a certain country. Right-wing extremist forums with people flexing what they're going to do next week. I prefer social media where everyone can see each other. Maybe you should all leave it all together. It's problematic. The problem is wherever people clash, there's going to be people who just want to be negative, who want to discuss things from a certain perspective and who want to be edgy and see things differently. That's just part of human nature and human togetherness. Yeah, I know this is not a satisfying answer. Will we take another question? Yeah, we can do that. If there is one. Okay, there's one.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. I have one question. Community Management Coordinator for Kugel 2. That's a channel looking at the constructive side, and we're happy to have a very constructive community, and we're not hit as badly as Tagesschau, for example. But we always try to find out, I hope you can understand me with the mask, I'll take it off. We always try to analyze who are our hardcore fans, who are our shepherd users who go into discussion. And for Tagesschau, who has so many comments, do you also have your usual suspects that you know and like? Or isn't that possible with all the massive commenters? Or how would you rate the tool in managing the active community? So what about the community that likes the channels, that gives constructive comments, but doesn't necessarily always comment? How can you encourage that community and foster it? Yeah, those are the Tagi power users. We've got one colleague who's in the business longer than me, and for me, he's the personification of the meme where someone is looking at all those conspiracy connections because he has all the overview of all the users and the double accounts. So shout out. Those are our power users. There's constructive power users as well. A self-moderating community is a very nice term. Instagram is much more positive than YouTube or Facebook. On Instagram, you can watch, let's assume we have a diversity day posting and someone writes a homophobic, transphobic comment. And then you can really watch how people comment, what is wrong with you? Why are you like that? And I think this is much more valuable than if when 30 people say to one person that is not okay, than if one referee tells the person that's not okay. That's for technical reasons. Usually those comments can be edited. So if I, as a Tagesschau presenter, for example, someone writes, I like champagne, waits until we like it, and then 12 hours later we edit the comment to say something about people of that religion are bad, and then it says Tagesschau likes this as long as we don't realize. So when people DM us on topics that are especially moving and write their stories, and thank us for our contributions, that's to do with the users. If someone tells us a tragic story, for example, for the Organ Donation Day, we had a story about organ donation, and someone tells us about their own story with a close relative who got a donor organ. And of course, we say thank you for sharing your story. You can't just ignore that. That would be inhumane. So this is how we try to foster our community. And if we play referee, the community also honors it. And when we're attacked with the usual comments, users also help us. And you should trust users more that they moderate themselves.
Hello, Alex.
Hi, my name is Alex. I have a question about constructive comments. So you talked about only a small percentage of people commenting at all, the majority being silent. And if people post or see hate comments, negative comments, they have qualms about commenting at all. So other than fighting hate, what possibilities do people have who are interested in the constructive side of the community and who are interested in participating?
Also tatsächlich, diese eine Studie, die jetzt
Yeah, the study
Moderation als dann auch
that was recently published also named motivation. So they develop different styles of addressing the community, and the feeling alone that the community presenter is there raises the possibility of people participating. And every hate comment and every conspiracy myth that results in people not wanting to speak, this kind of active interaction, there's not a lot of research on it yet, on community management in a constructive way and on the realm of action. So having someone there that's looking at the debate and that's helping, and I would reverberate what Laura said, that other than the digital space, you need other spaces where you can promote constructive criticism. I see it with my students. They're not really active in the comment sections because, of course, they're afraid of shitstorms, hate speech, and all that. And a seminary room with 30 people has a lot of power for people to dare show engagement online, and then any call I could publish on social media. And then there's also hybrid offers that can give impulses for constructive comments. Maybe one last point. Positive comments are also about resonance. Why do so many people not comment? Because the chance to get resonance on a negative comment is much higher than getting resonance to a comment like, I like the topic, or thank you for your research. There's no escalation. There's no celebration, but that is what we want. We want resonance. And this is where we can deal with the topic to reward positive comments and create resonance so that it becomes attractive to write positive comments. Okay, thank you very much for your questions and encouragement, for your utopia and your discussion points. I think this can only be the starting point for community management in the future and new ideas. And we've seen at there's so many outlets, whether it be the tools or the community managers and how we can support them and enable them with consultation if there's problems. And we need to demand those things. We need to demand it from our publishers and editors, because this is how we can define the communities and leave behind the hate in the speeches you just talked about. Thank you for being here. Thank you for enjoying the safe space today, and have fun at the republica.